Hey, everybody. You're about ready to hear my interview with Ollie Woods. Ollie Woods is the founder of PreProduct. PreProduct is a Shopify app that allows merchants to offer pre-orders in a seamless, easy way. It creates a fantastic customer experience in the process and increases your rates of pre-orders so that you can gauge demand of new products that you're about ready to launch. Hope you enjoyed the interview. I know I certainly did. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the pod. I have an awesome guest for you today. His name is Ollie Woods, and he has got an amazing new product called PreProduct, and it is an app for Shopify. Welcome, Ollie.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure, mate. Now, you reached out to me. I hadn't heard of PreProduct before, but it looks like a pretty amazing app. And as we all know, Shopify doesn't handle pre-orders as gracefully as we would like. And therefore, it looks, at least from what I can tell from your website, which is preproduct.io, that you guys help Shopify merchants to handle pre-orders in a very, very smart way, and to where the customer gets to pay now or pay later, deposit-based pre-orders, etc. So you've got this app that basically eases the pre-order process and allows the merchant to handle pre-orders in any way that they like.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we, like you mentioned, allowing the merchant to charge in a way that makes sense for them, whether it's upfront, later, deposit-based. That was always a big focus. We've been around officially for about 3 years now, although the first year was a bit quiet. And for those that flexible charging, we used to do it in a couple of different ways. We had ways around it with payment links and that kind of thing. And then I think it was about 9 months ago, Shopify invited us to a closed beta program. And behind the scenes, they'd actually been working on some deferred charge capabilities, which I can get into later. But that's just allowed us to offer this flexible charging in a kind of much more graceful way, and it's made the whole pre-order space a lot more exciting.
Love it. Love it. Now, you do have a product background, and you do have an entrepreneurial background. You were product designer over at Pernod Ricard. You co-founder and designer of Typified, freelance branding and packaging designer. So I guess you've got this creative background, an entrepreneurial background, a product management and design background. So how did your product or your platform, PreProduct, how did that come about? Were you scratching an itch? Did you have an e-commerce store on Shopify that you wanted to run pre-orders for and couldn't? Oftentimes, platform devs, app devs, etc., they're scratching an itch in some way. So how did your platform come about?
Yeah, you're bang on the money, Jason. It was scratching an itch. The company before PreProduct, it was a kind of physical goods business. It was going to be e-commerce, although we went through Kickstarter to get started. And it was a kind of smart home tech company, and it is all revolving around there's a technology called Smart Ink. So you can get areas of a printed poster on demand. And our kind of whole thing was we were going to have these posters and it kind of connect to the internet and change. Maybe they'd show you the weather, but it would just be ink and kind of paper. And yeah, we went for Kickstarter and we launched that and we got it out, and lots of trials and tribulations there, but it worked and we fulfilled. But then we were looking for kind of what was next, what was going to be the new kind of variants we're going to release, what the kind of future SKUs going to be. And I was just looking at the costs involved for COGS, and it's just so risky, like expending that much money, paying for the freight, paying for in our case, printed circuit boards, but even like something maybe potentially less involved, fashion or something like that. There's a whole product design process, there's getting all the materials. It's just so expensive, so costly. And I was just thinking there's got to be a way to start like kind of capturing demand and start taking some money from customers while a lot of this is happening, namely when we're happy with the factory sample and maybe we've even placed our shipment and that's on the way to us. Surely we can start taking orders quicker and sooner. And that kind of birthed the idea of PreProduct. And then so later on when I closed down Typified, that's what this company was called. Yeah, PreProduct was the kind of thing that I started looking into, and my kind of partner Eliza, and yeah, fast forward 3 years, that's where we are today.
Wow. And obviously you've got this experience with sort of product road mapping, product design, UI, UX, etc. So that side of the business was probably coming pretty natural to you. However, obviously when you start getting into app development and distribution, etc., we're starting to get into some pretty technical spaces as it relates to e-com. So when you first started out, at least looking back at your background, it doesn't look like you're a developer. It doesn't look like you're a coder. Maybe you are. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But how did you start to build out your product development team, your actual coders? Did you offshore that? Did you outsource that? Did you just get a couple of contractors in initially? How did you get this first MVP idea or concept, or I guess that first proof of concept version of the app? How did you get that out the door?
Yeah, you're right, Jason. At least my career has been in product design and kind of graphic design originally, then going more into product design. After that company I just mentioned went by the wayside, I knew I wanted to get into the next thing would probably be software and hopefully this kind of pre-order idea. And we'd spent a reasonable amount of money on the last thing and that kind of hadn't given the money back. We broke even, it was fine, but I didn't really want to start investing a ton more into this new thing, especially like you hinted at before it was proven out. So yeah, I just dove into development and I found I'd always been a little bit handy in the last projects used a programming language called Python, which you've probably heard of. And that was fine, but I've stumbled across another language called Ruby. And Ruby, it's what Shopify's backend's built in. It's a really nice language. And yeah, I just fell head over heels in love with it. So fast, like 3 years later, I'd like to think fairly competent in that. And then along the way, we hired freelancers, contractors, and kind of more specialists. But to answer your question, I'm now in that position where I work on both design and development.
Awesome. And so are you doing that on your own now, or do you have a team that helps you with that, or are you pretty much you're the man, you're owning the whole piece end to end?
I think it's getting a bit trendy now, but we're mostly contractors. So it's myself and Eliza, and Eliza does she does the marketing kind of side of things, and then I kind of own product, and then we'll get contractors in on a kind of project basis. And yes, I'm stitching it together, at least on that side, but we reach out to others when needed.
Yeah, it's amazing because Ruby has heard great things about Ruby, particularly Ruby on Rails. It certainly is. It never grew to I guess the size and scale and popularity that something like PHP did, and some of the other, and certainly nothing to the scale of JavaScript or some of the other front end languages. And so it's interesting that you settled on Ruby. And from what I understand, the scuttlebutt from the industry finding good Ruby devs is a bit like pulling hen's teeth to a degree. So I guess it's good that you've picked that up and have that skill in-house yourself under one roof. And at least when somebody else writes code, at least you're in the position where you can review it and make sure that it's of decent quality.
Yeah, that's right. Just I think, yeah, know enough to be dangerous. And then, like you say, there's always different languages out there. So it can be, if you've got a language which isn't kind of JavaScript, it can be a bit trickier finding devs which, you're confident in. But yeah, no one said it was going to be easier, did they?
Yeah, coming up with a product is hard enough. And then I guess when you've got a little bit more of an esoteric language that isn't as common, then that's hard. Or if you're not building on React or something like that, then it can be a little bit challenging. Like you say, anything worthwhile doing is worth fighting for. Makes absolute sense. And let's talk a little bit about Shopify. Now, Shopify has historically had an extremely locked down checkout
Yeah.
experience, to the point where even with Shopify Plus, you could change a little bit of styling, and there's a couple of other things you could do there. You could introduce elements of script and flow, and there were certain things that you could do in checkout. But in terms of the core checkout experience, you really couldn't do anything beyond that. And then I think it was about a year and a half ago now, they started to open up their checkout a little bit more. They started to open up payments a little bit more with their SDKs. And they started to make those available to third-party developers on a selective basis, and in most cases on pretty much an invite-only basis, because they're really giving away the keys to the kingdom when they do that. And because Shopify is responsible for PCI compliance on the platform and checkout security on the platform, plus, of course, they want to own payments as much as they can, because that's where 70+% of their revenue comes from through Shopify payment. There's been this long-standing, I don't want to say bad blood or rift, but there certainly has been challenges around third-party developers, app developers, etc., getting access to Shopify checkout in a secure and authorized and approved way. And it sounds like you were pretty early on involved in those early betas where you got access to checkout, to where you can effectively take a prepayment via the secure PCI compliant checkout. It records the payment in your system so that, for example, if there was a 50% deposit taken, that you would know when that product ultimately got purchased by that person, when it was available through inventory was available, then there was only 50% left to pay. Sounds like you're really you're not really a third-party payment service. Really, it's almost like all you're doing is providing a ledger, right, for the amount that's already been paid. And then if a future payment requires 50%, then effectively you can almost apply a 50% discount to that product at checkout on the final purchase. So there's a lot of logic that sounds like it sits on your side, but it also has to play nice with Shopify checkout. So can you walk us through how you got access to that, what that's been like working with Shopify, and maybe some of the complexities and challenges you've experienced?
Yeah, sure. I think it's quite an interesting subject to cover actually. So just from a kind of broad overview of what we do, just to set it up, PreProducts looks after the kind of entire pre-order process from kind of capture through to sending a customer to checkout, through to sending an email campaign, setting up a customer portal, and then allowing the merchant to trigger those remote charges later on. So our job is to let the merchant capture and charge pre-orders, and then also keep the customer in the loop and make sure that they're happy and it's not going to be a customer support burden. And that's the landscape of what PreProduct's responsibilities. And then in terms of the checkout, kind of hinted at it, yeah, or you mentioned it outright. Shopify aren't historically they weren't thrilled with people trying to tamper with a checkout, and I think was very low kind of customizability for a long time. And we always just treated the Shopify checkout as a kind of black box. We'd send our requests into it, and then later on we'd get a message, a webhook from Shopify saying, "Yep, the order went through." And then we'd take the baton and we'd do everything we need to. So the checkout was just this black box in the middle, and we'd feed things into it, and then get the result later on by asking. And that kind of worked well. And that's kind of what's still happening, to be honest, actually. So this new deferred charge capability, it's all built within Shopify's checkout, and they're the ones who manage the APIs and the functionality and all that. We're still just sending requests to them. Now, it's got a lot more complicated than it used to. There's different pre-order plans with kind of things like, is there a discount locked into this pre-order? Is it like a deposit up front? When's it meant to ship? All that kind of logic. But we're still treating Shopify as that black box. So luckily, we don't have to mess around with any of the kind of compliance issues. We can just lean on them. And to be honest, I much prefer it that way, just because the stress of kind of dealing with customers' cards and stuff, it's just, I'd much rather Shopify just do that, and we can rely on them being great at that. So yeah, the beta, that was really interesting. So we were reached out to by a couple of the guys at Shopify, and they asked if we were interested in going through this kind of 6 to 9 month process with them and iterating on it and testing this new kind of deferred charge capability they were working on. The experience was great, to be honest. It was really good, kind of really smart people. We had a Slack channel with them. They put together this big comprehensive guide on, this is how it's meant to work. These are the kind of calls you can make. These are our options. And it worked well. There wasn't really too many hiccups. I think it went pretty well. Like, they're obviously kind of experts at what they do. I think they had some ideas that we challenged, just because we'd already been offering pre-orders for years before that, and they were quite gracious and they worked around that and stuff. So yeah, I think it's been a success, and I think the guys at Shopify are really happy with how it's going as well. For them, it was almost an extension of their subscriptions offering, which they launched, I don't know, maybe it was a year and a half ago. I can't quite remember now, but not too long ago. So it was a similar kind of process for them. So it went relatively smoothly, actually.
And I guess what that also means is, it means because they've got this formal API that allows you to make partial payments or capture partial payments, and then also recall that order almost like it's in a draft order state, but it's not. It's actually a completed, accepted order, but you're just splitting up the charges that have been applied or the payments that have been taken against that order and allowing you to complete that at a later time. And I guess what that ultimately does is it does prevent you from having to effectively hack the Shopify API, which is how a lot of these subscription orders and all of these wish list items and the shopping carts in the past, where you wanted to split this up and you maybe wanted to have a gift function, a gifting function. Historically, prior to these new suite of APIs, and let's just call them, for lack of a better term, under one umbrella, checkout APIs, or checkout SDK in particular, and then of course a suite of APIs to be able to connect to Shopify to gather information and send Shopify information in relation to a given order. Before that, there was all sorts of clever and creative hacks that the community had come up with to support things like subscription payments and like prepayments, pre-orders, that sort of thing. And so I guess ultimately what this does is, instead of having to create a hack like in a draft order, for example, and then record a payment or take an offsite payment directly through your platform and then apply it as a discount, say, on a future order or completion of a draft order, which is where this sort of hackiness starts. And I think, to my way of thinking, correct me if I'm wrong here, it feels like Shopify's hand was forced a little bit in terms of these SDKs and APIs, because there was hundreds of different hacks, not security hacks, but there were workarounds. Let's use a more friendly term. Instead of hacks, workarounds for what Shopify did not provide historically. And I think Shopify was like, well, shit, if the community is this serious about providing functionality that we don't provide, why don't we at least make it a little bit easier for them to do it in a non-hackish way?
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good kind of approximation of the whole situation. Yeah, and these kind of hacks or workarounds. Yeah, they're interesting because when you do it and when you figure one out, you feel really proud of yourself, and you're like, I've actually managed to make this work, and this is going to be great. Then what usually happens is down the track there ends up being some kind of side effects, we can call them, happening, and they'll affect another process within Shopify, or something else will stop breaking. The nice thing about the deferred charge stuff is it's quite elegant. So the way it works under the hood is a customer will go through the checkout. Shopify will grab that card details and that order and the order details, and they'll put it on file. They'll put it in a database somewhere, and they won't open any transaction with the bank. There's no authorization period, nothing like that. They'll just save that data. And then when we tell them to, they'll get that data, and then they'll remotely charge the card and create and do everything else with the bank. So this kind of, it gets frozen in time. So you haven't got any issues with 7-day authorization periods. There's nothing like that. It still goes through the Shopify order process. And there's some other great kind of things that they've added as well, which I can talk about. But yeah, it's a really good point. It's not hacky anymore. It works really nicely. It integrates with the rest of Shopify. It's not 100% compatible with the rest of Shopify, but it's very close. So yeah, it just makes everything a lot easier. All of a sudden, we're working with the grain as opposed to against it.
And you also, I guess, that means you also don't have to worry about tokenization, for example. So instead of Shopify like giving you a payment token that you can hit at a later point, whatever, they've actually got an API endpoint, which then you can hit to take payment. You can tell them what the payment is. You can tell them the payment's already been made, et cetera, et cetera. And what that means, or they actually already know, if you've already taken a part payment through, say, Shopify payments, they know what part's been paid. They know the balance remaining until the order can be completed as a transacted and complete order for the fulfillment phase, et cetera, and going through the normal order status flow that would happen in Shopify backend. I guess what that means is that instead of having to, because typically what we see is we see tokenization happen at the gateway level, to where all these third-party systems like yours would typically be given a token by the e-commerce platform or by the payments platform specifically, so that you can do auths and captures and you can do all those things against that customer's card that they've put in. But I guess the way that Shopify has done this is it leaves payments as a little bit more of a black box. You don't need the token. All you got to do is request that this particular order ID, which Shopify already knows about, charge this amount or charge the balance or whatever it might be. And really, you just handle the customer facing workflow and the customer journey and customer experience to make that super seamless and really frictionless. And you let Shopify completely worry about the payments, the tokenization, et cetera.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one piece which comes into this, when a customer does pre-order, even though they haven't been charged yet, an order in Shopify will be created straight away, which would ordinarily be a bit of an issue, because then your fulfillment partners start kicking in and maybe it just gets sent off straight away. So they introduced something called fulfillment holds, and these are great. So it means when this pre-order is created in Shopify, it'll straight away get this fulfillment hold in it. And just like the kind of transaction was frozen in time, the same thing will happen for this order. So it will just be held and it will sit there and you can see it. Your stock level will even decrement. So it will go down so you can know you're not overselling. And then once you're ready to charge, then you can kick everything back off. You can trigger the charge. The customer's card will pay, the order will be released from this hold, and everything will start flowing again. So it's quite elegant in the way you get to freeze everything in time, and then you get to press the kind of unpause button, and then everything continues, and all your normal systems should just be respected, which it's rolling out nicely, and it lives up to that promise, to be honest. It's working well.
And speaking of that particular situation with that new fulfillment hold, effectively what it sounds like they've done is they've created a new order status called fulfillment hold, but it's also directly linked to the payment status. So effectively, until an order is fully paid, then it is not allowed. You can't override that order status like you could traditionally. You're able to override an order status and progress it through the order statuses via API, regardless of the payment status. So for example, let's say a merchant wanted to ship an item. Let's say they were using an offline payment method like direct credit, and the customer hadn't paid or they hadn't seen the payment go through, but they wanted to release an order anyway for fulfillment because, I don't know, let's say they're a VIP customer or something like that. Then you could override those order statuses via API. But it sounds like with this, with fulfillment hold, it is actually linked to the payment status in the back end of Shopify. And until it reaches a fully paid status, it doesn't sound like you can actually even override this order status via API anymore.
Effectively, so the way you described is the way that we think it should work. So that's how we fashioned at least PreProduct's workflow to work. So I think I'm right in saying that you can override it and you can manually release the hold. But yeah, the way we manage it is just like you described. You trigger the charge. If the charge is successful, the hold will release. But then if card charge isn't successful, we won't release the hold. So as you described is, yeah, effectively how it works. But I think you can override it, but I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting. Yeah. So really what Shopify has done is they've effectively created a new order status, which prepends a normal order processing state that would hit when any order would normally come through into Shopify. It would hit that processing status, except for offline payments, which would require a manual override and a status change in order to go through the fulfillment workflow. Yeah, it sounds like Shopify's leveraged most of their in-house infrastructure, existing infrastructure, just extended it slightly so that now, from a payments perspective, you don't have to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things like have a separate independent checkout or have some sort of token sharing happening or something like that. That they stay within their really nice box of PCI compliance and security. Shopify payments, they're able to still clip the ticket, etc. Merchant still has clarity on when they've got paid, when they haven't. And yet they're able to take pre-orders in a way that Shopify doesn't really normally support out of the box. Now, have you found that since this new layer of functionality for checkout has come into play, did you ever have any competitors for what you're doing right now? Did you ever have any competitors in the space, or do you now, or do you feel like, hey, we're actually doing something so groundbreaking here, specifically related to Shopify, that we're kind of working in a total blue ocean space here? We don't really have any competitors at all.
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, of course, one I ask myself quite often. Yeah, so we definitely have competitors, and we had a couple of other kind of apps, that two others to be specific, that came through the beta process with us, and it's since been opened up. So I have to believe some other apps are offering it. I suppose where we try and do things a bit differently is twofold. We target releasing new products as our kind of main use case. If you launch a new product, a new SKU by pre-order, we're probably the right solution to go with. And then the kind of other way we try and differentiate is just trying to look after that whole pre-order journey, from capture to communicating with the customer portals, the update emails, making sure the customer knows about everything. And then, there's a lot of other functionality we offer as well. But those are our kind of 2 points where we try and differentiate.
Yeah, and from what I understand, I mean, at least with Rise AI or some of the other forms or technologies or plugins or apps for Shopify that purport to be able to help you manage pre-orders or at least gift payments, et cetera, gift cards, store credits, et cetera, they do leverage a more of a store credit. They leverage more than just the checkout, right? They're typically creating a full store credit-based ledger that's offsite, that's sitting within their platform. And then they'll apply like a coupon code or a discount code to dynamically behind the scenes at checkout to apply the proper discount, et cetera. And so they'll go back, going back to that concept of creating workarounds for the way that Shopify does things. It sounds like your platform is leveraging pure native Shopify functionality, whereas these other platforms, even if they do offer something similar to what you do, they aren't necessarily utilizing this new Shopify functionality in the process.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we're in a good position. So we were talking about Haxel here, weren't we? We were offering some stuff that's now a lot better now. Like, we've offered deposit pre-orders for quite a while now, but we used Shopify payment links before, which like 80-90% of them kind of worked. But now it's working a lot better. But I suppose our advantage when all this new technology came out is we were already really involved in kind of this pay later pre-order or this deposit kind of pre-order. We were just doing some kind of hackier ways to get there, but the kind of app and the logic and the kind of structure was mostly based around this kind of pay later workflow. So when this deferred charge technology came out, I think it was probably a lot easier for us to implement it in a nice, elegant way, as opposed to some of the other guys who would have been a bit more strict, kind of pay now, we just get the buy button, and then we'll just not do that much else. We were already trying to play in that pay later space. So I think we're probably in quite a good spot to implement it in a nice, hopefully kind of user-friendly way.
And is your new version of this app, is it the one that's available in the Shopify App Store? So you're out of beta now, you're out of that initial test phase, and you're in the full-blown release phase, at least the initial commercial release phase of the product. That's the one that's available now?
Yeah, that's right. It's all available now. We've still got some of the older ways of doing things like payment link pre-orders, but all of the deferred charge capabilities now in the app and are supported quite nicely. And we've got stuff like we start to build out other kind of features that support it, for example, like dunning flows and that kind of thing. So it's all fully integrated at this point.
Nice. And it looks like you got that traditional SaaS model where you've got this flat fee plus a percentage of the sales fee, like effectively a commission on your growth package. You got two packages, at least from what I can see on your website here, growth package plus package. You got growth package, $19.99 a month, 0.5% of paid pre-order revenues, 7-day free trial for both packages. And then once you jump up to the plus package, you got $59.99 a month and a 0% commission. So I guess on the plus package at $59.99 a month, let's say you're doing, I don't know, let's say you're a very, very big Shopify Plus store and you're doing $1 million a month in revenue. And let's say 10% of that is in pre-orders. That could be $100,000 a month in pre-orders that you're taking payments for. And you're only spending $59.99 a month to get that full end-to-end functionality.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, works out being a really good deal. Most businesses I work well with pre-orders. It's quite a high level concept, isn't it? Yeah, we see companies from loads of different kind of sizes and industries having a lot of success with it. And like you mentioned, if 59 a month seems a bit steep, or whether maybe you're only having a couple of pre-order campaigns a year, we've got that lower plan, and I think it was just a 0.5% commission on that one. But we try and offer a couple of options there.
It's pretty democratizing, really. And I know a lot of Shopify merchants feel like they're getting a death by 1,000 cuts because I don't know too many Shopify sites that don't have at least 10 apps running on them. And if the apps run between 10 and say $100 a month, it can add up pretty quick. You can pretty quickly get $1,000 in apps, $1,000 a month in apps running on a Shopify store. It's just pretty easy these days. And so I know a lot of merchants do feel a little bit like that. But if you $19.99 a month is pretty bloody cheap to be able to offer full-blown pre-orders on Shopify in a really seamless, customer-focused way. And to me, it feels like quite a no-brainer. And are you at liberty to share roughly, you don't have to tell me exact numbers, of course, because I know that's commercially sensitive, but do you have hundreds of customers running the app now? And are you getting feedback from them, or you have thousands or tens of thousands of merchants running this app now? Where are you on your growth phase of app development and deployment and marketing?
Yeah, sure. And without getting too specific, we process millions of dollars in pre-orders a month. We just went through the pricing, and we're not super expensive, but we are probably higher end in the market just because we don't offer a free plan, and we never have. We just made a decision that we'd rather have a smaller team and kind of focus on the problems of kind of still small to medium businesses, but sometimes the more cost sensitive or the merchants who just want to have apps on a free plan can have a different problem set to the kind of stores making a bit more money. Yeah, we've got hundreds of merchants, not thousands yet, but hundreds, and yeah, millions of dollars processed every month.
Wow, very exciting. And in terms of what your platform can do today from a functional perspective, you're the product guy, you're the roadmap guy. What does it not do today that you'd like it to do, or that your customers are saying, we'd love it to do this? What's on your say 6 months to 12-month roadmap for the platform that you'd really like to add to the platform to significantly uplift the value that you think you're already offering today?
I like this question, Jason. Oh, yeah. So there's a couple of different categories, isn't there? So there's the kind of really cool, edgy, that's really exciting to think about and talk about, but maybe not all merchants would take advantage of it. Maybe it would be a bit more niche. And here I'm thinking about headless. For example, as of recently, we can support this new deferred charge pre-orders on headless stores and more than just headless stores, it completely outside Shopify. So if you've got a Shopify account but your site is mainly WordPress, that's fine. You can take pre-orders with PreProduct from your WordPress side because we kind of use Shopify storefront token and we can do that kind of stuff. So that's an area which is quite exciting. There's a bigger feature, like we're launching smaller features all the time, but there's this bigger feature which I'm still sizing up a bit, and it's been on my mind for probably 6 months now. And it's this idea of our kind of pen name for it is PreProduct end to end. And what that would be is it would be a kind of separate cart on your Shopify store that just takes pre-order items. So if you pre-ordered the blue t-shirt would go to the pre-order cart. If you buy now the yellow pencil case, that would go to your regular Shopify cart. And this would be a bit more an advanced feature, but the kind of benefit of that is that you could all of a sudden have your orders very much segmented towards orders would only ever have pre-order items in, or they'd only ever have buy now items in. Because right now, there's this scenario where you can have a mixed cart Shopify order, and it's fine. Shopify got some good support for it. We've got some good support for it.
But it holds up the entire order in the fulfillment phase until that pre-order item comes in and is available.
That's right. And it's also this issue where the merchant maybe they don't let it hold up. Maybe they ship the buy now and the pre-order later. Well, all of a sudden they're out of shipping. Like they've paid for shipping twice, but the customer's only paid for shipping once. So that's where this kind of end-to-end solution might come in. But we're still sizing it up and thinking about the most elegant way to approach it.
Love the idea, though. And it somewhat possibly goes back to that draft order concept, right? Like to where you could create 2 draft orders from a single aggregated cart. Your platform would do that. And then it would it would separate it out into 2 draft orders effectively, one with buy now items, one with pre-order items. And then you could execute and effectively trigger off those orders, one to go straight to fulfillment and one to effectively go on that fulfillment hold with Shopify. So it feels like there's probably a way to do it, again, using pretty standard Shopify, but maybe a little bit of crafty workaround stuff there. But that seems like a absolutely no-brainer logical next step in terms of a customer experience, because if you've got 5 items in your cart and 2 orders are pre-order items and 3 orders are not, you don't really want the entire order held up over these 2 items that you're waiting to come into stock.
Exactly. And our kind of way of doing it now is we just force a redirect to checkout for pre-order items. It's a setting. You don't have to have it like that. But so if a merchant really doesn't want this scenario, they can just say every time someone pre-orders, they're force redirected to checkout and they have to buy that thing in isolation. But yeah, this idea with batting around, that would allow for kind of carts and multiple products, and it would just be a bit more of a graceful way of handling it.
Totally. Yeah. And it would save the customer from potentially having to pay for shipping more than one time on the one order. And the merchant could decide how they handle that. They could decide whether they eat the extra shipping costs or split the extra shipping costs. I guess there's probably a number of different ways they could handle shipping to reduce friction and increase conversion, but yet not have to eat every penny of shipping costs. If, for example, they're a furniture company or something like that, it means that they then have some downside risk protection and have some logic controls built in there as a bit of a safety net for those types of orders.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel lucky in a way, because lucky and unlucky, pre-orders they really do touch a lot of areas of a buyer journey, a lot of areas of Shopify. We're just talking about shipping costs, but there's lots of other things they touch. So it's interesting in terms of we've got to get all of these points of a journey working nicely and elegantly. But at the same time, it can just be a bit of a headache because we just got to be on top of all these different areas across all these different store setups and just make sure that this is just working seamlessly and it's not going to throw a kind of wrench in the works and anyone's kind of processes. But yeah, it's nice. We've got our work cut out for us for sure.
There's nothing like a challenge to keep a dev happy, that's for sure. And especially a product guy. It sounds like you've got a lot ahead of you to keep you interested in your own platform, your own technology. And to look, at the end of the day, it just creates more value props. And then at that point, maybe once you've got additional functionality, you could create 1 or 2 more tiers of the platform. And effectively, as you go up tiers, you unlock additional functionality. It seems to be the way that these micro SaaS products or plugins or apps seem to be going, is that as you add functionality, you potentially add more tiers and make it more value for everybody as they want to add new things. to the customer experience. It sounds like absolutely you're running the SaaS playbook, which makes absolute sense. It's the SaaS playbook for a reason. And people want to get a hold of you or find out more about PreProduct. Are they best to go to preproduct.io? Are they best to reach out to you, Ollie Woods, on LinkedIn? Although, as I saw from your LinkedIn profile, you do need to update it that you actually are involved with PreProduct, because that wasn't immediately apparent to me. But would you prefer that people just go to preproduct.io, maybe start the 7-day free trial, or would you prefer that they reach out directly on LinkedIn or something like that?
Yeah, preproduct.io, that's a good place to start. And like you mentioned, we've got a free trial. Yeah, add it to your store, kick the tires. If you need any help setting up, just give us a shout. If any of you've got any kind of questions about what we chatted through today, you can email me at ollie@preproduct.io. I spell my name OLI, even though my mum disagrees with me about that. She thinks it should be OLIE, but OLI@preproduct.io. And we talked a lot about the technical side of pre-orders. They can be very easy and plug and play, and that's how we design it. So if you just want to ignore most of what we've talked about today, that's fine. But if that side of things gets you excited and you want to know more, we recently put together a kind of free in-depth technical guide, which is on its own domain at orders-on.com. And that kind of just goes into all the different facets of pre-orders. If you want to get a bit more advanced or do something a bit more technical, that'll have a little section on it and you can read into that as well.
Wow. Thanks, Ollie. Really appreciate all of your wisdom and giving us all the detail about PreProduct. Now we're coming to the end of our time together, and I have really enjoyed our conversation. We're at the exciting point where I get to turn the tables. I get to turn the microphone over to you to ask me one question, any question you like. Can be personal, can be professional, can be anything you want. So it's completely up to you. So here I am turning the microphone over to you on the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, Ollie Woods from PreProduct. What is your question for me today?
I think, seeing we're at the start of the year, it's got to be how are you planning to grow the podcast and your kind of other ventures this year? Kind of what kind of growth channels are you excited about, or strategies, or audience building, customer acquisition? What are you looking to employ this year?
Absolutely fantastic question. And this is something that has been gnawing at me through the end of 2022 and the start of 2023. The podcast had seen really steady growth over the last year and a half, but maybe not as fast as I would love to see. And I guess no matter how fast something is growing, you always want to see it grow faster if you're creating and putting things out into the world. We had last month, January, we had our first 1,000 plus listen month. And we've never had that before. And so we're definitely up and to the right, but it's maybe not as fast as I would like. And it's certainly something I've been my brains about. We'll continue to advertise organically. When we put a post out, we'll continue to do that through LinkedIn and through my profile. Over 30,000 followers now, getting up there, at least in terms of reach. It's pretty good. But yeah, I think one of the things we're planning to do this year that we haven't had in years gone by is we're going to create a new sub-segment based on B2B. So we focus really heavily on the complexities of B2B e-commerce. A lot of my consulting, or I'd say the lion's share of my consulting, is now to B2B merchants selling physical products. And really, there's just so much more complexity in the B2B space versus the B2C or D2C e-commerce space. And it's also much more immature. It's much more nascent. So B2B e-commerce is probably, I would guess, somewhere between 5 and 10 years behind the B2C or D2C e-commerce. And I really think there's a bit of a dearth of information out there. There's a few people out there putting out really good content around B2B e-commerce, but I think there's definitely some gaps there that I'd love to fill or help fill. And I'd love to get some specific content out there. So I've already got the Mentoring Moments sub-series, and I think that's going really well. And I'm really enjoying mentoring people. And I'm really enjoying trying to share the parts of those mentoring talks that I have, the things that I think will benefit a wider audience, and grabbing those clips and putting those all together for the audience. I think it's been really fun for me, and hopefully it's been great for the audience. But I think that second subset segment based on B2B, are really heavily focused on B2B, and we'll probably have some merchant stories in there, some B2B merchant stories. We'll have some really focused podcast episodes on B2B e-commerce platforms and supporting technologies and some of the complexities, operational complexities of getting that all set up. So this year, I'm really focusing on how can I expand the content that I offer through the podcast without diluting the core message of the tech side, because that's still the bread and butter of the podcast, is being able to talk to people like you and really expose merchants to new ideas, new concepts, new customer experiences that they haven't ever thought about providing before, perhaps, and helping them to really understand the nitty-gritty of e-commerce, particularly from the tech perspective. I'm really still wanting to focus on that as the bread and butter of the pod, but also trying to fill it out and maybe increase the broadness of the reach of the content by having other sub-series. That's my goal this year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The B2B e-commerce stuff, yeah, you've got my mind going because, of course, like D2C, direct to consumer, that's the like kind of been the trendy thing for a while, and I think gets a lot of the kind of attention. But B2B e-commerce, like we work with quite a lot of kind of wholesale stores, and I know Shopify wholesale is getting more and more support, and a lot of kind of volume travels through B2B e-commerce. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's a very kind of niche to do some work against.
Awesome, mate. Listen, I really appreciate your support, appreciate your kind words, and I really thank you for coming on and sharing all of the information around pre-product and kind of the concepts of some of those moves that Shopify is making to try to make their technology a little bit more partner friendly from a tech partner perspective and from an app dev perspective. Can't do everything themselves. It's absolutely impossible. They're already spreading themselves quite thin trying to battle Amazon on behalf of their merchants. So yeah, it's exciting to see them starting to understand the concept of, yep, we understand we got to have a secure and lockdown platform. It's a SaaS platform and we carry a lot of responsibility for that. But we also can't completely lock out developers that need to do some pretty complex stuff in our platform. So thank you for sharing the background on that and how we got from there to here and what the implications are for people like you and developers like you that are trying to create apps that create a really seamless customer journey ultimately at the end of the day. And look, I look forward to having you on hopefully in another 6-12 months and seeing where pre-product is, because I'm sure we'll see a lot of development between now and then. So thanks a lot for sharing.
Awesome, Jason. Yeah, I've enjoyed this a lot. Thank you.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.